I don't want no oil a-spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever or whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and you have tuned into For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. We talk about them in the way they affect you, your family's wealth, your health, your happiness. And we have a really great show lined up for you today. We have an interview with our very first elected official. I've kind of stayed away from interviewing people that are actually politicians on this show because I like to focus on the issues of ecology and environment. But we managed to land an interview with Representative David Leland, who's the ranking Democrat on the committee, the Ohio House committee that's hearing testimony right now about the House Bill 6. And since House Bill 6 is such an incredible environmental issue, I think it was appropriate this time to actually interview a politician. And I have to say, it is a fantastic interview. I mean, you'll hear it we'll play it about quarter after. Just an intense interview with him. Then we'll hear from our advertisers, our wonderful advertisers and our sponsors. Maybe we'll have an announcement or two. Then we'll talk about environmental news around the country and around the world, and there's a fair bit of it. And then we'll hear from Rebecca Wood, our wonderful co-host, who's supposed to be calling in to the show any time now. And then, and hopefully, some point during this hour, we will hear from you at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. This is a call-in show, and it's the best show in Ohio, but it does get better every time you call in. So, and you can call on what we're talking about, or we can call on any sort of environmental topic or environmental issue that has caught your attention during the week. And this has been a kind of a hard week in our household. And I don't talk too much about the stuff going on in my personal life on this show, but I just want to say that, there's someone very dear to me who's battling cancer right now, and anybody who has a loved one who's got like a serious illness knows that, sometimes you end up spending that all night at the emergency room kind of thing, and that happened to us a day or two ago. And it's just a reminder that we talk about these environmental issues, and sometimes it gets very abstract. Sometimes you're talking about dollars, you talk about concentrations of SO2 in the atmosphere, and things get very technical, and they kind of get away from the fact that what we environmentalists are doing, what we ecologists want, is for us to be healthy, all of us, and for nobody to have to spend that sleepless night in an emergency room because someone has contracted an illness that was caused by environmental pollution. Or one of the things about House Bill 6 that doesn't get talked about enough, I think, is that the coal plants that we're going to be charged to subsidize, especially the one down in Indiana, put stuff into the air, put sulfur dioxide and other pollutants into the air that cause asthma attacks and lung disease in adults and children in southern Ohio. And so in a very real way, passing bills like House Bill 6 and getting those sorts of policies in place caused the situation where you've got the people suffering and the family suffering and disrupting what should be a healthy, happy life. And I just wanted to bring that home, that what we're talking about when we talk about ecology environment is real suffering if people make the wrong choice. Now, to kind of lighten that mood up, to kind of bring us back from that, though, I do want to talk about what happens when you make the right decisions. And I saw a post the other day on Facebook from an old high school friend of mine. I grew up in western New York, around Rochester and Buffalo. And New York State has something called the Adirondack State Park, which is the largest state park in the country. It's tremendous. And the origins of this park went way back to the turn of the last century. And what happened was, as New York City started growing, started blooming into the metropolis that it is today, people were using charcoal. They were using charcoal for heating and for cooking. And so there was this tremendous demand for charcoal. And so the entire northern part of New York State, this huge area of millions and millions of acres, got completely denuded. All the forests were cut down, and it was just a vast wasteland of stumps. And there were, as predictable, there were rainstorms and mudslides and people getting killed by mudslides from these deforested places. And nobody wanted to live there. Nobody wanted to build there. And so the New York State Legislature said, you know what? We're going to make this whole area, I believe it's 9 million acres, we're going to make it forever wild. And they passed a law saying that the state is taken over, because the people who owned all that property, once they cut the trees down and once all the topsoil washed off, they just abandoned it because it wasn't good for farming, it wasn't good for building. The trees were gone, so there was no more economics. So there was all this abandoned wasteland, and they had literally turned that part of the country into a moonscape. So closing the barn door after the disaster, the New York State Legislature said, okay, this whole area is forever wild. And, it was a grand gesture at the time. But what has happened after that, what has happened over those 100 years, is that the whole place has returned. The trees have come back. And it's literally now one of the most beautiful points on the planet. And in fact, in the huge calculations about CO2 and global warming, the forests of the Adirondack Mountains are a very significant, a very measurable part of recapturing that carbon and taking it out of the atmosphere. And right now, fall is starting here. We had fall equinox, as they did all over the planet, back on the 22nd. And the trees are starting to turn around here, even though there's no sign of any frost coming. But they're a little ahead of us in the Adirondack Mountains. Because it's a little cooler, and so it's a little further north. They're already getting the colors, the really beautiful, beautiful colors. And it's literally one of the most beautiful places on the planet. And the wildlife has come back. There's bear there, and there's deer there, and there's even moose there. Moose have migrated in just recently from Canada, and ecologists had been saying it would be impossible for the moose to come back because deer carry this parasite that kills moose. But what's happened, to much to everybody's surprise, is that sort of the moose have staked out areas like prime moose territory, like in bogs and stuff, and the deer kind of moved aside to let them have those areas, and so now you have both moose and deer. And it just continues to get better. It continues to get cleaner, and more animals keep coming back, and the populations are getting healthier and healthier. That is the lesson to take away. We're in a very bad place right now in terms of sustainability, in terms of protecting the planet, in terms of protecting our society and each other. But if we make the decisions to protect the environment, it will recover. It will come back. It has amazing healing powers. And so the Adirondacks of today, even though the trees now are about 100 years old, 120 years old, the trees back then were hundreds of years old, 200, 400. Still, it's a healthy forest, and it's incredibly beautiful, and people literally come from all around the world now to be in the Adirondacks in the fall. We can do that with the whole country. We can make the whole planet, again, a beautiful, healthy, vibrant ecosystem, but not if we keep making decisions and keep putting policies into place like House Bill 6. And so I think on that note, we can go to our interview with David Leland. Are we all set, Russell? David Leland. Could we start again with you giving your name and who you represent?
Okay. I'm State Representative David Leland, and I represent Ohio's 22nd House District.
Okay. And my first question, have you ever seen anything like House Bill 6 before in your experience as a legislator?
No, I haven't. I mean, the bill is flawed in so many ways. I mean, it took every dollar of the $61 million bribery scandal to push that atrocity through the legislature, because it is so flawed in so many different ways that if it had just been a normal piece of legislation, it wouldn't have even made it out of the first hearing. But because it had $61 million worth of bribery behind it, it was able to pass at least through the Ohio House with 2 votes to spare. And the only reason it passed was obviously because of the huge bribery scandal that we now all know about.
Well, a lot of the debate on House Bill 6 has focused on the economics, how much it will cost. Will Ohioans end up paying more or less? But isn't this also an environmental issue?
Well, to me, it's all about the environment, okay? I mean, I think the money issue is important. People of Ohio, especially now in these times, don't need to be sending billions of dollars to people that don't need it. I mean, that's never a good idea. But what people sometimes forget about this bill is that it completely destroys Ohio's green energy economy. And what I'm talking about is an economy that has produced over 114,000 jobs in the state of Ohio, an economy that has saved people $7 billion in energy costs. And because of the savings of $7 billion in energy costs, because people use less energy, because of the efficiency programs and other programs that are eliminated by House Bill 6, we can see an additional 10 million tons of carbon that will be put into the atmosphere because of what happens under House Bill 6. So to me, the economy the economics are not there, and people shouldn't be wasting money on House Bill 6. But also, the future of our society, the future of our planet, how people are going to live, what's our responsibility to making sure we solve the existential problem that confronts everybody in this world, and that's the climate crisis. This was going to be part of what our responsibility was, and we completely eliminated that with House Bill 6.
Yeah, I remember when House Bill 6 was first proposed, it tried to bill itself as a clean energy bill, but as soon as the coal companies wanted in on it, that was just chucked aside.
Yeah, I mean, we're subsidizing, we're spending $444 million to subsidize 2 of the oldest, dirtiest coal plants. One of them happens to be in the state of Indiana, okay? So, I mean, it makes no sense. None of this makes any sense. And if you look at it, you'd say, who would pass something? Well, how could something like this pass through the Ohio General Assembly? And then you realize what was going on with the $61 million bribery scandal.
And actually, this kind of ties into my next question. On For a Green Future a few weeks ago, we actually had the deputy ambassador from Germany talking about their energy program they call EnergyVeda, and that's a plan to shut down all their coal plants and all their nuke plants and switch over to wind and sun. And it's been incredibly successful for them, and it's been a real boon to their economy. So I guess the question is, why can't we have nice things like that in Ohio?
Well, that's a very good question. And if Ohio, and if I were running Ohio and I didn't have to, and I was able to call all the shots, we would be doing stuff like that. Because obviously we need to transition away from fossil fuels. I mean, oh my gosh, take a look at what's happening in California. Oh my gosh, take a look at what's happening in the southern part of the United States. Take a look at what's happening around the world. I mean, how much of this do we have to have thrown in our faces before we realize that we have to transition out of fossil fuels into other energy sources? I realize it's not going to happen overnight. I realize there has to be a transition period, but we have to accelerate that transition period now, or actually 10 years ago, but we can't go back in time. So we need to accelerate the transition now so that we can be responsible tenants of this thing we call planet Earth.
Right. Yeah, that's very much one of the points that we like to make on For a Green Future here. You're speaking our language there, Representative.
Well,
appreciate it.
We're speaking our mutual language.
Right.
Yes.
Now, I haven't been able to watch all the hearings, but from the parts that I have been able to see, it kind of looks like House Speaker Robert Cupp is sort of stacking the witnesses with groups that support HB6 or they support big parts of HB6, as opposed to a balance of those opposed and those who want the full repeal. How does it look from your chair? I mean, you're
well,
go ahead.
The whole hearings are just a joke. Okay, I mean, they're just stalling. They're trying to look like they're doing something, and they're doing absolutely nothing. We've seen some polling recently where 80% of the people of Ohio are vehemently opposed to the provisions of House Bill 6. If the Speaker would open the hearings up to public comment like normal hearings are opened up so that everyday citizens could come in and testify, we would be flooded by hundreds, maybe thousands of people who would come to Columbus and testify about how bad House Bill 6 is. But he doesn't want to see that. He doesn't want to see that on television, on the Ohio Channel, or read about it in the newspaper. So instead, we have these high-paid lobbyists who come in and talk about, well, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea after all, and yeah, there's a scandal, but let's just forget about the scandal, but we want to do this. But even those people that have come to testify, one by one, have basically admitted that there is no good reason for keeping House Bill 6 intact. I mean, they may want to keep a portion of it or modify it, but nobody, even the people that have been paid to come in and testify in front of our committee, almost nobody has come in and said, yep, I want to keep it the way it is. Because they know how bad it is. They know it's a $1.3 billion bailout of nuclear power plants that haven't even proved that they need the money. They know it's a $355 million bailout of First Energy. They know it's a $444 million bailout of two coal plants, one of them in the state of Indiana, and they know that it destroys Ohio's green energy economy. And so nobody has basically come in and said, yeah, we want to keep it, and hopefully we'll get rid of it.
Seems like a pretty simple proposal. I mean, as you say, even the supporters don't support huge chunks of it. It seems like the first step should be just a complete repeal, and that's what
repeal it.
Yeah, a lot.
Repeal it.
Mm-hmm.
It is the product of the largest bribery scandal in the history of the state of Ohio. The largest bribery scandal in the history of the state of Ohio. That's what HB6 is a product of. Okay, so we need to say so let's forget about the millions, the billions of dollars. Let's forget about the environment just for a moment. We need to send a message to the people of Ohio that the state of Ohio is not for sale, that somebody cannot engage in a $61 million bribery scandal and get away with it. Okay? They should not be able to get away with it, because if that's the message, if we don't send that message, then what are we saying about what's going on in Columbus? What are we saying about the Republican leadership in Columbus if people can get away with spending $61 million, the largest bribery scandal in the history of the state of Ohio, and they still get their ill-gotten gains? What are we saying about state government under the Republican leadership? So we need to get rid of it right now, and then those of us who are interested in a sound, progressive energy policy in the state of Ohio need to come together, hammer out a new one, and move forward.
That sounds wonderful. I mean, I think one of the things that came through in the in the testimony in 2019 when they were first looking to pass it was that we've got something like $4 billion worth of wind waiting to go in, but on hold because we've got regressive laws governing things like setbacks and so forth.
Yeah, there's a whole myriad of problems that we need to address, and setbacks are one of them, and then there's provisions of local control. I mean, there's just a lot of different issues that we need to address. The first thing we need to do, though, is send a message very clear and very loud to the people of Ohio that bribery scandals are not going to be rewarded in the state of Ohio. We need to repeal House Bill 6.
Well, as you say, polls are showing, and I believe that most Ohioans want that full repeal. I guess the question is, how do we restore some measure of democracy to the Ohio state government? Because since the will of the people is pretty much dropping out of these hearings, as far as I can tell.
Well, I mean, look, we have an election coming up on November 3rd. There are people who have voted for this and people who have voted against it. I mean, people need to take a look and see what their representatives have done, and people need to make a decision whether they're happy with what their representatives have done in this case. I'm not going to promote one way or the other. I'm just saying people should make an educated decision as to what they're doing, and one of the things that they should educate themselves on is House Bill 6. Okay, and if they're not happy about House Bill 6. There are ways they can let people know about it. All right. One of the ways you let people know about it is at the ballot box. I mean, obviously, if we had fewer Republicans in the Ohio General Assembly, bills like House Bill 6 would not have passed. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And you read about it in the newspaper, and we've heard it on the news. But if we could have a more representative, a more bipartisan approach to government in the Ohio General Assembly, then measures like House Bill 6 would not be successful.
This is kind of a tough question for you, I think, but I kind of have to ask it. The first House Bill 6 in 2019 passed with some Democrat support, and in fact, it wouldn't have passed without that Democratic support. But now that all these revelations have come to light, are the Democrats now united in the idea of repeal, or is there still some Democrat support for it still and some Republican opposition the same way it was in 2019? Has there been a change or an evolution in either party's positions?
Well, I can't speak for the Republicans. I think the vast majority of Republicans in the House still support House Bill 6. I know that 58 members of the House have co-sponsored one or the other repeal House Bill 6 bills. So there are 58 members of the House. There are 99 total. There are 58 of the 99 members of the House have indicated they want a full repeal of House Bill 6. And 99% of those 58 members, I mean, there may be one or two, but 98% of those 58 members are Democrats, okay? And I think that a lot of people, especially in my party, the ones who voted the first time, didn't understand the scandal and everything that was behind House Bill 6. And I think that obviously if we'd had all the facts in front of us when we were voting on House Bill 6, I think it would have turned out differently as far as our caucus is concerned. But, nobody knew about all the shenanigans and all the illegal activities that were occurring to promote House Bill 6 until just a few weeks ago. And so I think that right now the Democratic caucus is almost totally united in the repeal of House Bill 6. Unfortunately, the Republican caucus is not. And I think you have a minority group of people in the Republican caucus that want to repeal House Bill 6, but the majority of the Republicans in the legislature still want to support House Bill 6. But if we could get it to the floor, if the Speaker would keep from blocking it from coming to the floor, and Democrats have continually tried to get these repeal House Bill 6 bills to the floor, if we could get it to the floor, there are 58 members of a 99 General Assembly membership that are willing to vote to repeal House Bill 6 now. So we have a majority. You need 50 votes to pass any bill. We have 8 votes to spare at least. We may even pick up a few converts along the way. We at least have 58. We could repeal it now. It's the Republican Speaker of the House that is keeping that bill from going to the floor for full repeal.
Yeah, and just on a personal note, I was one of the people that was working on the repeal petition, and faced those the thugs, the blockers as they're called, that were being paid out of that $61 million. And it was a dark day for democracy. And I think any legislator that stands in support of that kind of political repression, you can't call it anything else, basically should be ashamed of themselves. So.
Well, I don't disagree. I mean, I don't know how any legislator can look at what happened and not be repulsed by it, and not go, oh my gosh, regardless of what their philosophies might have been on some of the issues, how can you look at what happened and not be repulsed by it and not want to send a message that we need to repeal House Bill 6 just because of how it was done and all the activity, the illegal activity behind it? I mean, like I said, complicated energy policy is complicated. And I've been working on it for years, and I'm happy to continue to work on it with Republicans and Democrats and anybody else who wants to work on it. And I don't know what the future will bring, and I don't know what the next policy will be. But the first thing we have to do to establish the credibility of the Republican-controlled legislature is to repeal House Bill 6 so that people around the state realize that we're not going to be swayed by this kind of illegal activity once we find out about it, okay? And now everybody knows about it. Now it's our responsibility to repeal House Bill 6.
There we go. Yeah, quite the fiery interview with Representative Leland there. And I think the most important piece of information I got out of that interview that I did not know before was that there's already 58 members of the House ready to repeal it. They have signed co-sponsorship. Once that gets introduced to the floor, it gets repealed. And so literally solely the only thing holding it up is the Republican leadership. And this is unacceptable because the bill was unacceptable, the bribery was unacceptable, the corruption is unacceptable and should be unacceptable to any Ohioan. I mean, Ohioans pride themselves on being sort of salt of the earth, down to earth people who are honest and upfront and just straightforward and just we get things done. We don't make a big fuss about it. But we can't do that if we tolerate corruption like that. So very appreciative to Senator Leland, Representative Leland, but for that interview. And we are also very appreciative of our sponsors. And we have, it's time to hear from our sponsors. And the For Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. Several ways to get a hold of them. One is to just pick up the phone or turn on your phone and give them a call at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. You can go to their website, wcparks.org, and you can download their app, which is you go to any app store and just search for WC Parks. And finally, of course, they're on Facebook. And you look for Wood County Parks, and they're constantly updating all those sources. So you can find out what sort of fun things they're doing. And now, by way of public announcement, and again, if you have an announcement dealing with the ecology, the environment, send it to us at joe@joedemar4agreenfuture.org, and we will most likely read it on the air, quite probably. And as an example, right here, the Wood County Park District's having their annual Scarecrow contest. And this is a contest, is the 19th year of it. And what you do is on Tuesday, October 13th, from 4 to 7:30 p.m., you bring a scarecrow that you've made at home. You bring it to the Wood County Museum, which is at 13660 County Home Road, and they'll provide you with the fence post to hang it on. You have to bake it yourself. They don't provide the straw or anything like that. And there'll be judging, there'll be prizes. Top prize is $100, second prize is $50. And they'll be displayed at the museum from October 14th to the 25th. So you'll get it back in plenty of time for Halloween. It just sounds like fun. It sounds like a fun sort of thing to do. And another fun thing to do might be to become one of our patrons. Yes, For Green Future is brought to you by some dedicated patrons. They've gone to patreon.com, searched for Green Future, and looked over the different levels of membership for a monthly donation. And you just pick one, you put your credit card number in there, and painlessly that little bit will come out of your checking account every month, and joyfully we will accept it and use it to help continue to bring you stories like this one. Interviews with people that are right in the heart of these controversies. It's something I've kind of been able to pride myself on, that we've been able to get people that are right in the middle of some of these environmental issues and environmental battles. And so you're getting information here that directly from the sources. It's not being filtered through an editorial board. It's not being, vetted for, is this going to hurt the investments of the people that own us if we put this kind of information out? No, I want to bring you the raw, true story, and I can do that because I have patrons and sponsors, and so please consider joining their ranks and helping to get this information out. Speaking of joining ranks, Rebecca, have you joined our ranks? Are you with us?
Quite some time ago, actually.
Well, good. And so,
which is it's good. I get a better reception hearing the show over the radio than trying to listen to it on my phone.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you're with us, and anybody could join Rebecca and myself. We still have an open line at 866-240-1065. What did you think of what Representative Leland had to say? Give us a call and let's discuss it. So, how are you doing, Rebecca?
Oh, not too badly. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Still, recovered a little bit from a sleepless night, but I am recovering. That's the important thing, and we're doing good. We're on fire. Although, I can't muster as much energy as the guys do on Black and White Sports, the show that's just before us.
How are they that energetic? It's crazy.
I don't know. I actually asked them today, and they said it was just talking about sports. Just gets
help me.
adrenaline going. Yeah. No.
Right.
No, but we get our adrenaline going too. Just maybe not at the same level. So
there we go. Yeah.
And so one of the things that gets us going, though, is good environmental news, and we do have some this week. And so here's our Eco News segment. One, you may have heard about this. The mainstream media has picked this up, and that is that California, the state that is sort of, people kind of live in their cars there, as I understand it. California has decided that as of 2035, there will be no more gasoline-powered cars sold in the state of California. No new ones. You can hang on to old ones and used ones and trade those. But Governor Gavin Newsom did an executive order, and they estimate that'll reduce California's global greenhouse emissions by 35%, which is very significant because California actually emits more CO2 than most nations, since it's got one of the largest economies in the world. What do you think?
I was going to ask you about that one because I remember seeing a Facebook article, but I couldn't remember if it was the sale or the manufacturer or what it was of the gas-using cars.
Yeah, it's the sale of new gas-using cars. Looked at strictly from the environmental, the ecological, it's too slow, and it's not quite enough, but it's definitely a huge step. And I think the important thing is that it signals the change. It signals finally somebody in the government is saying, we are serious about this. We have to stop the carbon. And what happens all over the world, and what happens is once people start to make this transition, once they start to say, okay, no more carbon, okay, what do? They find that there's all kinds of things they can do and all kinds of advantages. And in country after country that makes this commitment, they find they can actually meet the deadline, meet the goal much, much quicker than they anticipated. That's happened.
So basically, this is not as hard as we're making it.
Right. Yeah. Once you start doing it, it turns out it's much easier than you think. And so California has started doing it. They have made the official commitment. Now, this is interesting. It was by executive order. It's not a law. And I expect there's going to be challenges in court, probably by the new car manufacturers. I don't know. But the deed is done. It has been proclaimed. And so let's hope they can stick with it.
Well, California is sort of almost out of breathable air, or at least was last week, if I understand it. I was getting scared. I have some Facebook friends in California, and people were like, I can't breathe in my house even.
Yeah. No, it was the air in California last week was literally the worst in the world, worse than Mumbai, where, people literally drop dead in the streets with pretty regularly from the air pollution. And yeah, because of the forest fires, large chunks of California was worse than that. And so this brings us to our next bit of eco news. Nice segue there, Rebecca. We didn't even rehearse that.
Yeah.
But update on those fires out west. 2 weeks ago, there were 97 fires, one of which was under control. Things have improved somewhat. We're down to 72 fires. Again, with one under control. I wonder if it's the same one. But so far, fires out west have burned 7.3 million acres. That right now is the sixth largest amount in the past 10 years, but it's climbing because we still have till the end of November for fire season. And the worst year so far in the past 10 years was 2015, where they had 9 million acres. But as we talked about last week, there's differences in the kinds of fires. So like if you have 9 million acres, but it's a low level, a cool fire, then it's not that big a deal because the land can recover from that kind of a fire easily. But what we've got is 7 million acres, 7.3 million acres of incredibly hot, intense fires that burn a lot of nutrients out of the soil and make it much harder to recover from. So even though the number is slightly less, the seriousness is as much or more than 2015 so far. And the weather predictions, according to the Fire Center that I got these data from, over the next couple weeks, humidity dropping down to like 10%. More dryness and lots of very high winds. So we're poised. The conditions are right for us to break that record and make 2020 the worst fire season in the year. We're on our way. We'll see if we get there.
Yeah.
Right. But one record we did break without too much trouble, too much difficulty was this was the hottest summer in the Northern Hemisphere on record, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And it was the second hottest average year so far, 2.14 degrees above average. So, back when we were first, this is one of the most frustrating things about being an ecologist, an environmentalist, is we were talking about this stuff way back in the 1990s. And we were saying if we get a 2-degree increase in average temperature, that's going to be enough to just about wreck our society. We're not going to be able to recover from the droughts and the crop failures and the fires and the floods. And we were saying this back in the 90s, and here we are, 2020, 30 years later, and what do we got? We've got 2.14 degrees above average. So we told you it would happen. We explained how it would happen, and now it's happening. But at least now people and countries are reacting. People are buying the hybrid cars more often. Some people anyway are buying the big gas guzzlers less. They're actually making the decisions to put solar on their house. And a lot of countries have taken it seriously and are light years ahead of us dealing with the problem, but at least they're dealing with the problem. So we are, we're way behind on some of this stuff. At least some of us are trying, and I think that's the upbeat part. And another upbeat thing is New Jersey has left Ohio in the dust again, and New Jersey has passed a single-use plastic ban, which is the toughest in the nation. They banned all those film plastic bags, and they banned paper bags too, which was a little dicey because some people are like, well, paper bags are fully recyclable, but what happened is that the retailers all said, look, if you ban plastic bags, everybody's going to ask for paper, and paper is more expensive. So if you want this bill to pass and you want us to keep giving you politicians money, you've got to include the plastic. You've got to include paper also. And there are ecological arguments for including paper. It's not like paper bags, single-use paper bags are a wonderful boon to the environment. You still got to cut trees down to make them. But they've banned both plastic bags and paper bags. And they also, the good thing is they banned polystyrene containers. So those things you bring Chinese food home in, those are outlawed. And along with plastic cups and knives and forks, and you can still get plastic straws, but you have to request them. They won't be just given to you.
The thing is, you think of New Jersey as such a chemical wasteland, but maybe that's why. I don't know. They've emerged as a leader now. That's kind of cool. Good work.
Well, one of the things that has pushed this in New Jersey is the Jersey Shore. I mean, the Jersey Shore has been a tourist destination for people on the East Coast for generations, and especially, millions of people from the New York City area would go to the Jersey Shore to hang out and be on the beach and so forth, especially when you had a hot summer like this past one. And what has happened is the level of plastic in the oceans has gotten so high that it just waves of plastic were washing up on the shore, and people couldn't bathe, and you couldn't walk on the beach because there was so much plastic washing up on the shore. And so that's one of the main impetuses for this law, and it's so it can be done. Of course, meanwhile, here in Ohio, the state legislature is debating a ban on plastic bans. The state is literally trying to make it illegal for any municipality to ban any kind of plastic, and it's So it's like there's 2 steps forward in New Jersey. Ohio's working on the step back. We're really trying to, the state legislature, I should say, and I have to point out again that this is an obnoxious minority that's running the country right now, and specifically running Ohio, because the polls show support. The majority of the people want clean energy. They want to protect us from plastic pollution. But this tiny cadre of well-paid people that are calling the shots in Columbus, they don't want what the people want, and so they're trying to force these terrible things on us, like a ban on plastic bans. I mean, if a community wants their community to be free of plastic bags, there's something called home rule. If the people in a community vote for it, put it on a ballot, and a majority pass it, I think they should be allowed to do it. But
and how is this even hurting the rest of Ohio? What are we, like a major center for the plastic industry or something?
There's a couple plastic manufacturers down around the Cincinnati area. I mean, they're small time, and they employ a couple hundred people, but it's not. But one of the big things. Okay, here now you've asked kind of a deep question there, Rebecca.
Yes, I have.
One of the main reasons that that industry wants to keep pushing the plastics is because they've got all this investment into fracking. And demand for fracking gas was going up for a while because they're closing coal and opening natural gas. But now the wind and the solar are getting to be so much of it, and it is less expensive than even the fracked gas. And so power companies are turning towards wind and solar more and more. So all these corporations have all these billions invested in the fracking industry, and if the demand for their product is starting to fall because wind and sun are stepping in, and so there's like, what do we do with all this natural gas? And the answer is, oh, we'll make plastic out of it. That's it. We'll just keep pumping the plastic. And so the Ohio legislature, it's very heavily influenced by the fracking industry, doesn't want anything that could threaten the plastics market because that threatens those industries. But
I thought people made plastic out of oil. I had no idea you could even make it out of natural gas.
Yeah, you can. Yes,
wow.
And yes, they have historically. Most plastic has been made from oil. It's easier to make it from oil. It takes less steps.
Right.
But you can make plastic from methane. It's not a problem. Just takes a bigger plant and some more steps, but you can do it. So all these things are tied in together, and of course, to save the planet, we have to stop taking out the fracked gas altogether. We have to just leave it in the ground. I mean, whether you take it out and put it into the air as carbon dioxide, or leak it out just as straight methane, or make plastic out of it and let that plastic break into micro and nanoplastics and coat the earth, either way, it's a bad decision. Either way, we should be shutting those wells down and capping them off and leaving it in the ground where it's supposed to be. So that's what we need to do. And New Jersey has taken a big step towards it, because reducing, and California's step is also important in this way too, because reducing demand can be a very effective way of eliminating an industry that's hurting the planet. And actually, I wanted to mention this week's show, that just recently ExxonMobil, which a few years ago was one of the wealthiest companies on the planet with billions and billions of profits every year, has been dropped from the S&P 500, because what's happening is all over the world, demand for oil is dropping, and part of that is COVID, but another part of it is conservation and switching to renewable energy sources. And so, so people who invest money are all about what the next trend is, because that's where you make the most money. Once a trend gets started, if you buy at the beginning of that trend, and then something takes off, and then you can sell once it's taken off, that's where you make tons and tons of profit. Whereas if you're in a quote-unquote stable industry that's just plodding along the way it has for the last century and a half, the way oil is, you don't make tons of profit on that. You might make an annual whatever off your blue chip stock, but you don't make those big returns that let you buy the third and fourth house and the fifth and sixth cars. And so what has happened globally is those big investors are starting to pick wind and solar over oil and gas, and that is crashing them. They are finding it almost impossible to get money and to get investment, which is a wonderful thing. And we just have to wait and see if it's going to be enough to save the planet.
Couldn't happen to a nicer industry.
My thoughts exactly. And another bit of good news piled on top of all of that. Michigan, Governor Whitmer, our neighbors to the north there, has committed to making their state net zero carbon by 2050, which, again, 2050 is too late. But, Michigan, the state which is probably built upon the auto industry more than any other state in the union, they have committed to zero carbon by 2050, net zero carbon by 2050, and so that's again another step forward. So it's ugly. We're not doing it in sync as a nation, but state by state, some are pushing forward, and other nations are pushing forward without hesitation. So as a globe, we're taking awkward, painful, slow steps, but we are at least now heading, for the most part, in the right direction, even though some states like Ohio are trying their best to pull everybody back and go back the other way. But
a friend of mine said the other day, Ohio is Ohioing hard.
Yeah, and we have to thank Robert Cupp, and we have to thank Governor DeWine, who has essentially instructed them to make this delay. And I've read one report that if the repeal doesn't happen by October 1st, even if they repeal it after that, we're still going to get the bill. We're still going to get charged until a new repeal gets passed and put into law. And so for some months,
it's called wine with the wine because you need something to get through it.
Yeah, right. So okay, but as I said, it's not all bad news. There's some steps being made, some progress, and so we know though that ultimately all this progress is going to lead us to an actual green future. And how do we know this, Rebecca?
Oh my God! Did you get another letter from the future?
I did. It was amazing. This morning it was this flash of photons next to my bed, and poof, there's this letter from the future. Dear GGG, well, the news is out, and it's another global uproar. Ujwala and I published a preliminary paper on the weird orange stuff we found, and even though we were careful not to use the word life anywhere in the paper, just by describing it, other people and the press immediately started calling it alive. It's being called the stuff by the press, and we've received orders from the UN General Assembly not to resume drilling until we have some idea of what the stuff is, what its role is in the Earth's ecology, and if our drilling would damage it. I did run an experiment on it using some of the bacteria from the deepest samples that we've taken so far, and the stuff seems to be like candy to them. The bacteria metabolize it immediately in a matter of hours, using all the carbon and minerals and excreting silicon, basically sand. I'm beginning to think that the stuff is an example of pre-cellular life. It may have existed on the surface of the Earth during the billion years or so when the surface was mostly molten rock. Once the bacteria showed up, it was driven underground. Until now, it only exists where the temperatures and pressures are so great that even bacteria can't survive. Oh well, we'll see. I'm facing an incoming army of scientists from around the world who want to study this stuff. It's going to be crazy around here. Love you, great-great-grandpa. Marie I. Yeah, so some more scientific excitement in the year 2300. As if she hasn't had enough for the past year. So we've run through all the stuff I wanted to run through, and we still have a couple minutes left. Time for a call at 866-240-1065. That's 866
and/or
240.
I have something to discuss.
Go ahead. What have you got, Rebecca?
Well, since it's still September, Alfred Frank's birthday, I looked up medicinal plants of Slovenia because he's got some plants in his garden that he knows the Slovenian name, but he doesn't know actually what they are.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I looked it up, medicinal plants of Slovenia. I got found a study by somebody named Matija Lumpert in the Journal of Ethnobiology and Ethnomedicine. It was a study of the regions of the towns of Karst and Goyansi, I think.
Uh-huh.
Karst is it's a sort of a broad limestone plain near Italy.
Yeah.
Goyansi is apparently, I guess it's probably what Karst is named after, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I knew what karst was. Karst is limestone bedrock that's like filled with chambers and caves and water flows through it. And we've got tons of karst here in Ohio. I had no idea that karst was named after an actual place called Karst. Wow.
Called Karst. And then Gorjanci is over in the mountains near Croatia. I guess they interviewed a bunch of people. They found 78 medicinal plants. It was 78 in Karst and 82 in Gorjanci, and 65 are in common in both places. Some of these included yarrow, for example, used for digestive problems, menstrual gynecological problems, cleansing the kidneys, diuretic, and they use a type of chestnut plant, a species of chestnut for varicose veins, spinal inflammation, leg circulation, onion, just regular old onion, used for skin sores and abscesses, upper respiratory problems, and then garlic, anthelmitic, which is against parasitic worms. Learn something new every day. And then chamomile, gastrointestinal problems, respiratory problems, infections, sore eyes, and just has a calming effect generally.
Right. Well, a lot of those things grow around here. I mean, pretty much everything you've talked about can be found grown wild in Ohio too. And did you ever go to speaking of karst, did you ever go to the Blue Hole of Castalia?
I never have. I know they have a limestone karst out in the Lake Erie Islands, though, which is why, like, it makes, if you're sitting in a lake in a limestone sponge, essentially, it makes pollution tricky, because anything that gets in there just spreads out all over immediately because it's a sponge, you know?
Which means we shouldn't pollute. But I'm afraid what we have to do. What we have to do now, though, is sign off, Rebecca, because we've run out of time. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week. This is Joe DeMare
and Rebecca Wood,
and we're signing off.
But that
Bye-bye.
nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!